All right, welcome back to Scrap Cooking. I'm Harriet Clooney, and this is the show where we're going to show you how to reduce your waste and save a bit of money and try to use every little scrap so we're not throwing out flavor. So today's episode is going to be on your apple cores, since it is apple season, just beginning. So there's lots of apples, apple pie, and all sorts of apple things to be made, strudel, all sorts of stuff. So there'll be lots of apple cores around, but don't worry, we're gonna use them. So today we're gonna make our very own apple scrap cider vinegar. All right, so right before we get going, just don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe so you can get up-to-date new episodes. And now we will start our sterilization of the jar. Fermentation. We want to start with very, very clean items because we want all harmful bacteria to be gone. And we just want the good bacteria to do its job. Got this mason jar and this rack and this pan. So what I'm gonna do is, there's two ways you can sterilize a jar. You can, in classic sort of canning, if you have a canning kit, you can do it in a pot with a little rack and the canning things. And if you don't have that, there's another option. So I'm gonna do it in the oven. So I preheated an oven to 325, and I'm gonna put this jar on a rack, this clean jar, on this rack, and I'm gonna put it in the oven, and we're gonna set a timer for 15 minutes. So now I'm gonna take these very clean pair of tongs, and I'm gonna put it, we're gonna make sure that it goes with the piece of the metal that's on top, so it'll actually stop it from rolling around. Gonna cool down that glass all the way. We want it to be like room temperature. So we're gonna leave that. But in the meantime, I am going to take this here piece of coffee filter and just get it ready. So it's what's gonna be on the top, because when we ferment things, we need oxygen to help the process along by sealing it up tightly and just leaving it at room temperatures where you can get botulism. And we don't want that. So we do want to keep some airflow. So you can use a coffee filter, you can use a tea towel, a very clean tea towel. Depends on the size of your jar, depends how many you're doing. But I find that coffee filters are readily available and tight enough that you won't get any little buggy friends in there. So, but it's a bit big for the top of my jar. So I'm just gonna cut it down. You could also use some cheesecloth. You'd wanna double it up a couple times to use it, because you don't want little fruit flies to get in there. So we've got this little hat that's gonna go on top. And I've got this little elastic that's gonna go around it when we're ready. Now what we're gonna do, I've got my my apples ready, and so I've got some water. And this water this is distilled water. So the problem with using tap water is that it's got chlorine in it, and the chlorine is meant to kill the bacteria that is in our tap water, which is good for tap water. We want that. But when we're fermenting things, we also know that, chlorine just doesn't discriminate between bacteria. It doesn't kill just the bad bacteria, it kills all the bacteria. And we want the good bacteria to work. So we can't use tap water, because it will inhibit the growth of the good bacteria that we're trying to cultivate. So if you have only tap water, there's a couple things that you can do. You can leave your water out overnight, and the chlorine will sort of gas off. The other thing you can do is you can boil your water for 20 minutes. But before you use it, it has to come down all the way to room temperature. It can't be hot or warm or anything like that. So there's two different ways to do it. And then the other option is, if you have distilled water, you can use that because it doesn't have any chlorine in it. So, and your fourth option is that if you have a carbon filter, you can use the filtered water, and that works as well. It removes the chlorine. So we've got our water, and I've got about 3 tablespoons of sugar in there. So I am going to add them together and then give it a good stir and try to dissolve as much of the sugar as possible. And that sugar is gonna be what feeds our bacteria. So, and that bacteria in turn is then gonna sort of break down the apple cores and the bits of apple that are on there, and then turn it into vinegar the longer that it sits. So it's taken about an hour for a glass jar to cool down all the way. So now what we're gonna do is add our apples into our clean jar with some clean tongs. And now we're gonna pour this water, our nice distilled sugary water. They're gonna float a bit, and that's okay. We're gonna just make sure that they can float easily so we can push them down if we need to. All right, so now we're gonna take our little hat and we are going to put it on top, and with our elastic, you're going to, there we go. So, I'm gonna just give it a little shake. Make sure that the top of the apple gets a little bit. So now we are gonna let this guy sit in a cool, dark place for 2 weeks. And then after that, we're gonna strain out the fruit and put it back and let that fruitless mixture sit for another 2 weeks. And then we will check it and see how our vinegar's doing. All right, so it's been a couple weeks, and we're gonna check on our apple scrap vinegar. All right, so, okay. Well, we got a little action. So now what we wanna do is actually take out the apple cores. So I'm gonna take this clean fork and without touching my fingers, because that will add bacteria that we don't want in there. We're gonna take out all the cores. And if you had, if it wasn't just the cores that are easy pieces to pick out, and you had lots of little bits in there, I would sterilize another jar, and then I'd strain it into the new jar, and then add the, put it back. I'm just gonna take that one little tiny piece. There we go. And now I'm gonna put my little hat back on it, and we're gonna put it back under there for another 2 weeks, and then see what it's like. At that point, we're gonna taste it, and if it's not quite acidic in the place that we want, then we're just gonna leave it for another week. Check it every couple days, but for now, we're just gonna take this lovely almost vinegar and let it hang out in the dark. Okay, so it's now been 4 weeks since we've started our apple scrap vinegar. And 2 weeks ago, we checked it and we took out the cores. And so it's now 4 weeks. We've got this, so we can see the color's changed a little bit. So just like your apple browns when it's exposed, when you cut it and it's exposed to the air, so too does our vinegar turn color. Same idea, it's oxidizing, it's reacting, having a chemical reaction with the air that causes it to turn brown. So it's gotten just a little bit darker. And, well, yeah, you can really smell the vinegar now, which is cool. It's always a treat when you do a fermentation and it works. Woohoo! So if it tastes like it's not as acidic as you are looking for, then you can leave it for another little bit. And part of what's gonna happen is it's gonna keep going, but another part is that it's gonna, some of the water that's in there is going to evaporate because allows some air to pass through it, our little filter hat. So it will, the water will evaporate a little bit, but the acid doesn't leave. So you're kind of playing with it that way. Now, you can use this vinegar for anything you would use cider vinegar for, except I would not use it for canning purposes, because you need a acidity of at least 4.5%, if not 5. 5 is better, and that's what commercial vinegars are at. They're usually 4.5 or 5. And that's the acidity you need to make sure that the harmful bacteria that you're trying to avoid is not present. So you could get a acid test, which you can get at like a wine supply store, to see what percentage of acidity you have. And if it's higher than 4.5 or 5, then you're good to use it for canning. But for most of us who don't feel like going to that store and doing that, we can just keep it in the fridge and use it for marinades and for salad dressings and for baking and things like that. So now my apple allergy actually does not extend to cider vinegar, which is good for me. So I'm gonna give it a little taste. Oh, yep. That's vinegar. But it has a really nice taste to it. And so now really we're just gonna put a lid on it and put it in the fridge. And it will hang out in your fridge. It's vinegar, so I wouldn't leave it on the counter just because could get some harmful bacteria, especially since we don't know what the acidity is. So it's best to keep it in the fridge. So I'm gonna put that in the fridge and use it for salad dressing later. So thanks so much for watching. So nice to see you and have you in the kitchen here at the Urban Element. And we're gonna see you next time. So cheers.